It began with a cardboard box. A simple, unassuming cardboard box that my grandson Ren had knocked over while chasing after the neighbor's cat that had wandered into my home. As colorful trinkets scattered across my living room floor, I heard my eldest daughter Imogen sigh heavily. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Mother, why do you insist on keeping all this? Junk? She gestured dismissively at the handmade items now strewn across my hardwood floors. 45 years of working, and this is what you have to show for it? Trinkets and crafts that belong at a yard sale? The words stung more than she knew. I said nothing as I knelt down to gather my treasures: small carved figurines, hand-painted stones, intricate origami pieces I had folded during lunch breaks at Briarwood Insurance, where I'd spent nearly half a century as an office manager. Each item held a memory, a story, a piece of myself I had carefully tucked away while the world wasn't looking. You should start thinking about downsizing, Mother, Thorne added from his position on my sofa, not bothering to help me collect my scattered possessions. Liquidate whatever assets you have. Make things simpler for everyone. I looked up at my children, Imogen with her perfectly tailored blazer, Thorne scrolling through his phone, and even Fern, my free-spirited youngest, who was examining my collection with thinly veiled embarrassment. In that moment, something inside me shifted. A lifetime of accommodation and quiet sacrifice suddenly felt too heavy to bear any longer. Actually, I said, rising slowly to my feet with as much dignity as my aging knees would allow, I believe I have quite a bit to show for my years. More than you might imagine. Imogen rolled her eyes. Mother, please, we've seen your bank statements. Bart left you comfortable, but hardly. Not everything of value can be found in a bank statement, Imogen, I interrupted, surprising even myself with my firmness. Perhaps it's time I showed you what I've really been building all these years. My name is Eudora Kingsley, though most people call me Dora. For 45 years, I worked as an office manager at Briarwood Insurance, a job that never made headlines or turned heads at dinner parties. When people asked what I did, their eyes would often glaze over before I'd even finished explaining. But I was good at what I did: organizing, mediating, smoothing ruffled feathers, and keeping the complex machinery of office life running without a hitch. My late husband Bartholomew, Bart to his friends, had been a high school chemistry teacher. We'd built what I considered a good life in our modest colonial home on Wisteria Court. We raised 3 children, paid off our mortgage, and even managed to put away enough for a comfortable, if not luxurious, retirement. What no one knew, not even Bart, was that I had been building something else alongside our conventional life. Something that started as a hobby, grew into a passion, and eventually became my hidden fortune. It began in my 30s, when I was drowning in the demands of motherhood and career. I'd found myself drawn to the delicate art of paper cutting, fascinated by how something as simple as paper could be transformed into extraordinary works of art, with nothing but patience and a sharp blade. My first attempts were clumsy, but I practiced during lunch breaks and late at night when the house was quiet. Over time, my hands learned the language of precision. By 40, I had expanded to other forms of art: wood carving, metalwork, textile, design. I converted our garden shed into a studio where I would disappear for hours on weekends. Bart would smile indulgently, calling it my sanity space. The children rarely showed interest, too consumed by their own developing lives. What none of them realized was that I wasn't just creating art, I was building a network. I began by selling small pieces at local craft fairs, then connecting with galleries in neighboring towns. I took classes from master artisans during my vacation time, claiming I was visiting my sister in Meridian Heights when I was actually studying under renowned craftsmen in Sage Blossom Shores. The money I earned went into a separate account, which I then carefully invested in emerging artists whose work spoke to me. By 50, I had amassed a collection that experts would later value at several times our household income. By 60, I had become a silent partner in the Velvet Fox Gallery, a venture that had nearly tripled my initial investment. All of this I kept to myself, not out of deception, but from a deep-seated belief that some things in life should belong solely to oneself. Perhaps it was also the quiet understanding that my children might never appreciate the value of what I had built, not until they were ready to see beyond the confines of conventional success. That readiness, it seemed, had not yet arrived. Even now, as they gathered in my living room to discuss what they clearly viewed as my declining years, they saw only an aging woman with a collection of worthless trinkets. "Mother, we're concerned," Imogen was saying, her voice taking on that particular tone she used for difficult clients, soft yet authoritative. "You're living alone in this big house, surrounded by clutter. It's not practical." "What your sister means," Thorne interjected, finally looking up from his phone, "is that you should consider moving somewhere more appropriate for your situation. Ivy Manor has excellent facilities, and you'd be with people your own age." I noticed Fern, shifting uncomfortably, tugging at the sleeve of her cashmere sweater. Of my 3 children, she had always been the most sensitive to undercurrents, though not always brave enough to swim against them. "What do you think, Fern?" I asked directly. She startled slightly. I just want you to be happy, Mom. And safe. This house has a lot of stairs, and after Dad's heart attack." She trailed off, unable to finish. There it was. Beneath their practical concerns lay fear. Fear that they would lose me as suddenly as they had lost their father. 3 years ago, fear wrapped in impatience, concern masked as control. "I understand your worries," I said gently, "but before we make any decisions about my future, there's something I need to show you. Not today. I'll need some time to prepare. But shall we say next Saturday? All of you, including Ren. I think it's important he sees this too." They exchanged glances, that silent communication of siblings who suspect their elderly parent might be losing her grip on reality. "Mom, if this is about your craft collection," Fern began. "It's not just about crafts," I interrupted. "It's about legacy, about what 45 years of living really looks like. Please, just come on Saturday." After some cajoling and promises that this wasn't some dramatic last will and testament scenario, they agreed. As they filed out of my house, I caught a glimpse of myself in the hallway mirror. Silver hair neatly styled, posture still straight despite the years, eyes bright with a secret about to unfurl itself. For the first time in decades, I felt a flutter of nervous anticipation in my chest. The fortune I had built had always been for me alone, my secret joy, my private accomplishment. Sharing it would change everything. But perhaps that change was long overdue. That night I called Mavis Holloway, my oldest friend, and the only person who knew the full extent of my artistic and financial ventures. "Are you sure about this, Dora?" she asked, concern evident in her voice. "Once you show them, you can't take it back. The relationship will change." "It's already changing," I sighed. "They see me as diminished, Mavis. As someone to be managed rather than respected. Maybe it's time they understood that there's more to their mother than they ever bothered to discover. And if they're angry that you kept this from them? From Bart?" I considered this for a moment. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Bart knew I had my art. He may not have known the extent of it, but he respected my need for something that was just mine. As for the children, they're adults now. They'll have to come to terms with the fact that their mother is a complete person, not just an extension of their needs. After hanging up, I made my way to the basement door. With a deep breath, I descended the stairs to what appeared to be a typical storage space. Boxes of holiday decorations, old furniture, the usual detritus of family life. But behind a seemingly solid wall of storage shelves was a hidden door, installed during a renovation 15 years earlier. Beyond that door lay the heart of my fortune, a climate-controlled room housing my most valuable art pieces, documentation of my investments, and the true measure of a lifetime spent creating beauty in secret moments stolen between responsibilities. I ran my fingers along the spines of leather-bound portfolios containing records of my acquisitions and sales. Tomorrow, I would begin the process of gathering evidence of my hidden life. By Saturday, I would be ready to reveal to my children exactly what their supposedly unremarkable mother had accomplished while they weren't looking. As I climbed back upstairs, I felt lighter somehow. Whether they approved or not, the truth of my life's work would finally see the light of day. And in that revelation, perhaps I would finally be seen, not as an aging woman with a collection of trinkets, but as an artist, an investor, a woman of vision and patience who had built something remarkable, one careful decision at a time. The week passed in a flurry of preparation. I contacted my attorney, Lenora Blackwell, to update my estate documents. I reached out to Jasper Thornfield, the director of the Velvet Fox Gallery, to arrange for the temporary transport of certain pieces. I even called my former apprentice, Zara Whitlock, who had gone on to become a respected sculptor with installations in capitals across Europe. By Friday evening, everything was in place. The basement room had been transformed into a showcase of my life's work, with my most significant pieces displayed alongside documentation of their provenance and value. A separate table held financial statements showing the growth of my investments over decades. Another displayed newspaper clippings and gallery announcements featuring my work under the pseudonym E. K. Wisteria that I had adopted early in my artistic career. That night, I slept fitfully, waking before dawn to the sound of rain pattering against my bedroom window. I made my way downstairs, brewed a pot of strong tea, and sat at my kitchen table, watching the sky lighten through the rain-streaked glass. "Well, Bart," I whispered to the empty chair across from me, "today's the day they find out who I really am. Wish me luck, old friend." As if in response, the rain suddenly stopped, and a shaft of early morning sunlight broke through the clouds, illuminating the kitchen in a warm, golden glow. I couldn't help but smile. Whatever happened today, I was ready. At precisely 10 o'clock, the doorbell rang. They had arrived. Standing on my porch were my 3 children, their expressions ranging from mild irritation, Imogen, to genuine curiosity, Fern. Thorn looked as if he'd rather be anywhere else, while little Wren bounced excitedly beside his mother, clearly viewing this unexpected family gathering as an adventure. "Good morning," I greeted them, trying to keep the nervousness from my voice. "Thank you for coming. Please come in." They filed into my living room, which I had deliberately left unchanged from their last visit. The same comfortable furniture, the same clutter they had criticized, the same modest home they had grown up in. I wanted the contrast of what they were about to see to be stark and undeniable. "Would anyone like coffee or tea before we begin?" I offered. "Mother, we've all made time in our busy schedules for this mysterious revelation of yours," Imogen said, checking her watch. "Perhaps we could get to the point?" I nodded, unsurprised by her impatience. "Of course. Please follow me." Instead of heading upstairs or toward my craft room as they might have expected, I led them to the basement door. Thorn frowned. "The basement? Mom? If this is about Dad's old chemistry equipment or something." "It's not," I said simply, opening the door and flicking on the light to reveal the ordinary-looking storage space beyond. "Please, just trust me for a few more minutes." They followed me down the stairs, exchanging glances that clearly communicated their concern about my mental state. When we reached the bottom, I moved toward the back wall of storage shelves and pressed a hidden switch. With a soft click, a section of the wall swung inward, revealing a gleaming steel door with a biometric lock. Mom? What in the world? Fern gasped. I pressed my thumb to the scanner and the lock disengaged with a soft beep. This, I said, pulling the door open, is what 45 years really looks like. As they stepped into the hidden room, their expressions transformed from confusion to utter disbelief. The space before them looked more like a high-end gallery than a basement room in a modest colonial home. Track lighting illuminated carefully displayed artworks, intricate paper cut, landscapes that captured the rolling hills of Briarwood Glen in breathtaking detail, metal sculptures that seemed to dance with impossible lightness, textile pieces that told stories in thread and fabric, and wood carvings so delicate they appeared to breathe. Along one wall, a timeline documented my artistic journey, from early Psy works to recent masterpieces. Another displayed framed reviews and gallery announcements. Glass cases protected smaller, more delicate pieces, each accompanied by a card detailing its creation date, materials, and significance. I don't understand, Imogen said, her voice uncharacteristically small. You made all this? I did, I confirmed, watching as Ren moved from piece to piece, his eyes wide with wonder. Over many years, in moments stolen between responsibilities. But this is only part of the story. I guided them to a sleek conference table at the center of the room, where I had laid out financial documents, investment portfolios, and ownership certificates. While I was creating art, I was also building something else, something that grew alongside my skills. Thorn, being the investment banker, was the first to grasp the implications as he began flipping through the documents. These are, Mother, these investments. He looked up, his face pale. Are these figures accurate? They are, I confirmed, verified by my financial advisor just yesterday. But this would make you... He couldn't seem to finish the sentence. Wealthy, I supplied. Yes. Not just comfortable, as you assumed. The art you see here has been valued at approximately $7 million. My investments, including my partnership in the Velvet Fox Gallery and stakes in several artists' careers, bring the total to just over $12 million. The silence that followed was deafening. Fern had sunk into a chair, her hand covering her mouth. Imogen stood frozen, her carefully constructed worldview visibly crumbling. Thorn continued to flip through the financial documents as if searching for some mistake. I don't understand, Imogen finally said, her voice tight. Why would you keep this from us? From Dad? Why live in this? This ordinary house, drive that old car, shop at discount stores when you could have. Because this was never about the money, I interrupted gently. The money was a byproduct, not the goal. And this house isn't ordinary to me, Imogen. It's where I raised my family. It's where I built this life. But we could have had so much more, she exclaimed, a lifetime of perceived deprivation suddenly flaring into anger. Private schools, better opportunities. You had everything you needed, I said firmly. And you've all done well for yourselves, haven't you? Without the cushion of inherited wealth or the pressure of expectations that often comes with it. That wasn't your decision to make alone, Thorn said, his voice cold. Dad had a right to know. We had a right to know. Perhaps, I acknowledged. But I needed something that was mine alone, something separate from being a wife, a mother, an employee. Can you understand that? No, Imogen said flatly. I can't understand deceiving your family for decades. Fern, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. I think I might understand a little, she said hesitantly. It's like having a secret garden that no one else can trample through. She looked up at me, her eyes questioning. Isn't it? I felt a rush of gratitude for my youngest child, who had always possessed an intuitive understanding that her siblings lacked. Yes, something like that. A garden is one thing, Thorn said dismissively. Millions of dollars is another. Matter entirely. I had anticipated their reactions, the shock, the sense of betrayal, the recalculation of our entire family history through this new lens. What I hadn't prepared for was Ren's response. The 10-year-old had been quietly examining each piece of art while the adults argued. Now he approached a paper-cut landscape that depicted Wisteria Court in all 4 seasons, the delicate layers creating depth and movement that seemed impossible for such a medium. "Grandma," he said, his voice cutting through the tension, "did you make this with your hands?" I moved to stand beside him. "I did, Ren. It took me almost a year to complete." He studied it intently. "It's like you captured time in paper. Like you can see everything all at once. Winter, spring, summer, fall. All right there." He looked up at me with undisguised admiration. "That's magic." Despite the heaviness in the room, I couldn't help but smile. Not magic, just patience and practice, and love for the craft. "Can you teach me?" he asked eagerly. Before I could respond, Imogen cut in sharply. "Ren, that's enough. This isn't the time." His face fell, and something in me hardened. This was precisely why I had kept my art separate. This dismissal, this inability to see value in anything that couldn't be immediately quantified and leveraged. "Actually," I said, placing a protective hand on Ren's shoulder, "I think this is exactly the time. Ren sees what the rest of you are missing. This isn't just about money or deception or what you think you were entitled to. It's about passion, dedication, and building something meaningful over time." I moved to the center of the room, suddenly feeling stronger than I had in years. "I didn't bring you here to apologize or to suddenly start funding your lifestyles. I brought you here because last week you looked at me and saw nothing but an old woman with trinkets. You saw 45 years of work and dismissed it as having nothing to show." I gestured to the room around us. "This is what I have to show. This is my legacy. Not just the monetary value, though that's certainly real, but the body of work, the mastery of craft, the quiet, consistent dedication to something beyond myself." Thorne shook his head, unmoved. "You still should have told us. Told Dad." "Perhaps," I conceded. "But I'm telling you now. And what matters is what you do with this knowledge going forward." The tension in the room was palpable. Decades of family dynamics, suddenly thrown into chaos by this revelation. I had known it wouldn't be easy, but standing there surrounded by the evidence of my hidden life, I felt no regret, only a strange, unexpected lightness. "I'll give you all some time to process this," I said gently. "Feel free to look around. Ask questions. When you're ready, we can talk about what happens next." I turned to leave, but Imogen's voice stopped me. "What exactly do you expect to happen next, Mother?" she asked, her voice brittle. "You drop this bomb on us, and then what? We're supposed to celebrate your deception?" I turned back to face her, meeting her angry gaze with calm resolve. "No, Imogen. I expect you to see me, really see me, perhaps for the first time. Not as just your mother, but as a whole person with passions and accomplishments of my own. What you do with that seeing is entirely up to you." With that, I left them in the gallery of my life's work and made my way back upstairs. As I put on the kettle for tea, I heard raised voices from below, Thorne and Imogen arguing, Fern trying to mediate as she always did. But underneath it all, I heard something else. Ren's excited exclamations as he discovered each new piece. And in that sound, I found hope that at least one member of the next generation might understand what I had been building all these years. I remained in my kitchen as the minutes stretched into an hour, nursing a cup of tea that had long gone, cold. The muffled sounds from the basement had quieted, replaced by footsteps on the stairs. Imogen emerged first, her face composed into the careful neutrality she used during difficult business negotiations. Thorn followed, still clutching one of my financial portfolios, his expression torn between calculation and confusion. Fern came last, guiding Wren, whose eyes still shone with excitement. "Grandma, you're famous!" Wren exclaimed, rushing toward me. "I saw your other name on those fancy papers." I smiled, ruffling his hair. "Not famous exactly, just recognized in certain circles." "E.K. Wisteria," Fern said softly. "All this time, those pieces I've admired at the Velvet Fox Gallery. They were yours." I nodded. "Some of them, yes." Imogen cleared her throat. "Mother, we need to discuss the practical implications of what you've shown us. There are tax considerations, estate planning matters." "Always the executive," I interrupted gently. "Imogen, I've managed these affairs for decades. My financial and legal matters are in order. But surely now that we know, we should be involved in—" "No," I said firmly, surprising even myself with my decisiveness. "My fortune remains under my sole control. I've shown you its existence as a courtesy and to correct your misperception about my life's accomplishments, not to invite management." Thorn's eyes narrowed. "So why tell us at all? Why not just let us continue believing you had nothing to show for your life? What was the point of this? Revelation?" It was a fair question, one I had asked myself repeatedly over the past week. Why not simply continue as I had for decades, keeping my accomplishments private? "Because I'm tired," I said finally. "Tired of being underestimated. Tired of being seen as merely an extension of your father or as an aging burden. I wanted you to know who I really am, who I've always been, before it's too late." "And who exactly is that?" Imogen asked, her voice edged with sarcasm. "E.K. Wisteria, the secret millionaire artist. Or Dora Kingsley, the mother who deprived her family while hoarding wealth." Her words stung, but I refused to be provoked. "Both, neither. I'm simply a woman who built something meaningful alongside the life you witnessed. The question is whether you can accept that complexity." Fern stepped forward, placing a hand on my arm. "Mom, I think what Imogen means is that this is a lot to process. You're essentially asking us to rewrite our entire understanding of our family history." "No," I corrected her. "I'm asking you to expand your understanding, not rewrite it. Everything you knew about me was true. I was dedicated to my job, to your father, to all of you. I simply had another dimension you weren't aware of." Thorn shook his head. "Dad should have known. He was your husband." "Your father knew I was an artist," I said carefully. "He knew I sold pieces occasionally. He respected my need for that space in my life. Did he know the extent of my success or my investments? No. Because that part of my life was mine alone." "That's called a lie of omission," Imogen said flatly. "Perhaps," I acknowledged. "Or perhaps it's called maintaining personhood within a marriage. Would you have preferred that I disappeared entirely into the role of wife and mother, Imogen? Would that have been a more acceptable choice?" She had no immediate answer for that. Wren, who had been listening to this exchange with growing confusion, suddenly piped up. "I think Grandma's art is amazing. And if she made all that money by herself, isn't that a good thing?" Out of the mouths of babes. I smiled at my grandson, grateful for his uncomplicated perspective. "Thank you, Wren. I think it's a good thing, too." A heavy silence fell over the kitchen. My children were grappling not just with the revelation of my secret fortune, but with the implicit critique of their own assumptions. They had built their understanding of me on a partial foundation, and now the ground beneath that understanding had shifted. "I have a proposition," I said finally. "Rather than continuing this circular argument, I'd like each of you to take some time to reflect. In 1 month, I'm holding an exhibition at the Velvet Fox Gallery, my first under my own. Name rather than my pseudonym. I'd like you all to attend. In the meantime, I'm going away for a few weeks. Going away? Fern echoed. Where? To Sage Blossom Shores, I said. I've rented a cottage there to finish several pieces for the exhibition. Alone? Imogen asked, her practical mind immediately shifting to concerns about my safety. Yes, alone. As I've done many times before without your knowledge or concern, I reminded her gently. Thorne frowned. Are those trips what you used your vacation time for all those years? Not to visit Aunt Lydia? I nodded. Lydia knew, of course. She was my cover story when needed. Another piece of their understanding shifted, another small betrayal in their eyes, but I remained steadfast. This moment, this decision to step fully into my dual identity, felt like crossing a threshold I could never return from. Yet instead of fear, I felt only a profound sense of rightness, as if I was finally allowing myself to become whole. The exhibition opens April 15th, I continued. I'll send formal invitations. Until then, I ask only that you keep what you've learned today private. Not because I'm ashamed, but because I want to reveal my identity as E.K. Wisteria on my own terms. Imogen looked like she wanted to object, but surprisingly, it was Thorne who spoke first. All right, he said curtly. Your secret's safe until then. But this conversation isn't over, Mother. I wouldn't expect it to be, I replied evenly. They left shortly after, Imogen barely meeting my eyes as she ushered Wren toward the door. Fern lingered, hesitating at the threshold. Mom, she said quietly, I always knew there was more to you than you showed us. I just never imagined this. She gestured vaguely toward the basement. I have questions. So many questions. I know, I said, reaching out to squeeze her hand. And I promise to answer them, after my exhibition. I need this time, Fern. Can you understand that? She nodded slowly. I think so. She paused, then added, Dad would have been proud, once he got over the shock. I felt tears spring to my eyes unexpectedly. Thank you for saying that. After she left, I sat alone in my suddenly quiet house, feeling simultaneously drained and energized. The truth was out, partially at least, and there was no going back. Whatever came next, I had taken control of my narrative in a way I'd never dared before. I picked up my phone and dialed Mavis. Well? She asked without preamble. How did they take it? About as well as you'd expect, I replied. Shock, anger, betrayal, curiosity, the whole spectrum. And how are you feeling? I considered the question carefully. Lighter, I finally said. Like I've put down a heavy suitcase I've been carrying for decades. Good, Mavis said firmly. It's about damn time, Dora. Later that afternoon, I began packing for Sage Blossom Shores. As I folded clothes into my suitcase, I caught sight of myself in the bedroom mirror, a woman of 68 with silver hair and laugh lines. Yes, but also with bright eyes and squared shoulders. A woman who, after decades of dividing herself in two, was finally stepping toward wholeness. The cottage I had rented in Sage Blossom Shores sat on a bluff overlooking the ocean, its weathered cedar shingles and blue trim giving it a timeless quality that had captured my heart years ago when I first discovered this artist's enclave. Had stayed here many times over the decades, always under my pseudonym, always with the excuse of visiting my sister. As I unlocked the familiar door and wheeled my suitcase inside, I felt the tension of the past week begin to dissipate. Here I had always been E.K. Wisteria, without apology or concealment. Here I could think clearly about the path forward. The caretaker had left fresh flowers on the kitchen table and a note welcoming Ms. Wisteria back to Sage Blossom. I smiled. At the irony, soon, both my identities would merge, and such deceptions would no longer be necessary. I spent that first evening settling in, arranging my art supplies in the sunroom that served as a studio, and walking along the shore as the sun set, painting the waves in shades of gold and crimson. The rhythm of the ocean had always helped me think, and now I had much to consider. What exactly did I want from this revelation? Not financial support for my children. They were successful in their own rights. Not validation. My work had received that from critics and collectors for years. Perhaps what I truly sought was integration, the chance to finally bring together the compartmentalized pieces of myself into one coherent whole. The next morning, I began work on what would become the centerpiece of my exhibition, a large-scale paper cutting that depicted not landscapes or abstract designs as most of my work did, but a woman's life journey, rendered in layers of intricate detail. From childhood to old age, the piece would show transformation through symbols and imagery, the figure moving from constraints toward freedom with each passing decade. Days blended together as I worked, stopping only to eat, sleep, and walk along the shore. I had brought my phone but rarely checked it, preferring the cocoon of concentration that had always been my refuge. Occasionally, I would see a text from Fern checking in, or an email from my attorney with documents requiring my signature, but otherwise, I existed in blissful solitude. 2 weeks into my stay, I received an unexpected call from Jasper Thornfield, director of the Velvet Fox Gallery. "Dora," he said, his voice tight with concern. "There's something you should know. Someone's been making inquiries about E.K. Wisteria, pointed questions about your identity, your background, your relationship to the gallery." My heart skipped a beat. "Who?" "A journalist from the Meridian Heights Chronicle," he replied. "Said she got an anonymous tip that E.K. Wisteria was actually a local retiree who'd been leading a double life." I closed my eyes, a wave of betrayal washing over me. "One of my children," I said quietly. "Pardon?" "Nothing," I replied. "What did you tell her?" "That I respect my artist's privacy and had no comment," Jasper said firmly. "But Dora, if you're planning to reveal your identity at the exhibition anyway, does it matter if it leaks beforehand?" "It matters to me," I said, my voice hardening. "This is my story to tell, on my terms." After hanging up, I paced the cottage, anger and disappointment warring within me. Which of my children had broken their promise? Imogen, still seething, about what she perceived as deception? Thorn, perhaps thinking the revelation would force me to include them in financial decisions. Or even Fern, possibly believing that bringing my story to light would somehow heal our family fractures. I picked up my phone, tempted to call each of them and demand answers. Instead, I set it down and returned to my studio. The piece I was creating, this visual autobiography, suddenly took on new urgency. If my story was going to be told, I would ensure that my own version existed first, rendered not in sensationalized headlines, but in the medium that had always expressed my truest self. For the next 3 days, I worked almost without stopping, my hands moving with practiced precision as I cut, layered, and assembled. When I finally stepped back to view the completed piece, I felt a profound sense of accomplishment. There, on the paper, in exquisite detail, was not just a woman's journey, but my journey, from constraint to freedom, from division to wholeness. On my final morning in Sage Blossom Shores, as I carefully packed my completed works for transport to the gallery, I received another call, this time from Mavis. "Have you seen it?" she asked without preamble. "Seen what?" "The article in the Chronicle," she replied. "About you, about E.K. Wisteria." My hands stilled. "No. How bad is it?" "Actually," Mavis said, her tone softening, "it's rather beautiful." Whoever spoke to the journalist clearly cares for you deeply. The piece talks about a woman of extraordinary talent who built 2 parallel lives, one devoted to family and community, the other to art and financial acumen. It's respectful, almost reverent. You should read it. Confused, I promised to look it up and ended the call. Opening my laptop, I quickly found the article. The Secret Life of E.K. Wisteria, Art, Identity, and the Courage to Create. As I began reading, tears sprang to my eyes. The article was indeed beautiful, thoughtful, nuanced, celebrating not just my artistic accomplishments, but the determination it had taken to carve out this space for myself in a world that often asked women to choose between family and personal fulfillment, and it had been written by Fern. My youngest daughter, who had majored in journalism before shifting to marketing, had crafted a piece that honored both sides of my life without judgment or sensationalism. She had interviewed Jasper, several collectors of my work, and even Mavis, weaving their perspectives into a portrait that felt startlingly true. She hadn't exposed me, she had illuminated me. At the end of the article was a personal note. E.K. Wisteria will be revealing her true identity at an exhibition opening April 15th at the Velvet Fox Gallery. As her daughter, I am honored to invite the public to witness the unveiling of not just new works of art, but of a woman who has, all along, been creating her masterpiece. A life lived on her own terms. I sat on the cottage porch, the article, open on my lap, watching the waves crash against the shore. Tomorrow I would return to Briarwood Glen to face whatever came next, the exhibition, the public revelation, the continuing complicated conversations with my children. But in this moment, I felt a profound sense of peace. The decisive turning point had come. Not in my revelation to my children, but in my decision to finally, fully claim all parts of myself. Whatever happened next, I would face it as my complete self, Eudora Kingsley and E.K. Wisteria, mother and artist, caretaker and creator. No more compartments, no more divisions. Just me in all my complexity, stepping forward into the light. The drive back to Briarwood Glen gave me time to reflect on all that had transpired since that fateful day when Wren knocked over my box of treasures. In just a few weeks, the careful boundaries I had maintained for decades had dissolved. And I was stepping into uncharted territory, a world where my dual identities would merge into one authentic whole. As I pulled into my driveway, I noticed an unfamiliar car parked at the curb, sleek, expensive, with Meridian Heights license plates. For a moment I tensed, wondering if some journalist had tracked me down. Then the driver's door opened, and Imogen stepped out. My eldest daughter stood straight-backed beside her vehicle, her expression guarded as I approached. We hadn't spoken since the day of my revelation, and Fern's article had surely complicated matters further. "Mother," she said formally, "I hope your trip was productive." "It was, thank you," I replied, equally formal. "Would you like to come in?" She nodded curtly, following me into the house. Once inside, she remained standing in the living room, her posture rigid. "I read Fern's article," she said without preamble. "And?" I prompted, setting down my bags. "And I'm still processing it." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I came to tell you that regardless of my personal feelings about your choices, I plan to attend your exhibition, as will Thorne and his wife." I studied my daughter, so composed, so controlled, yet I could see the conflict in her eyes. "Thank you," I said simply. "That means a great deal to me." Imogen shifted, slightly, her professional demeanor slipping just a fraction. "I also came to ask. That is, Wren has been asking nonstop about your art since our visit. He wants to learn. I thought perhaps." "I'd be delighted to teach him," I said, feeling a warmth spread through my chest. "Whenever you'd like to bring him over." She nodded, almost reluctantly. "He'll be pleased." Another pause, longer, this time. "Mother, I want you to know that while I don't agree with how you handled this, keeping secrets from Dad, from us, I do admire what you've accomplished." Coming from Imogen, this grudging acknowledgement was tantamount to a standing ovation. I smiled, recognizing the olive branch for what it was. Thank you, Imogen. Perhaps someday you'll understand why I made the choices I did. She straightened her jacket, her moment of vulnerability passing. Perhaps. In the meantime, Ren is free this Saturday morning if that works for your lesson. After she left, I stood in my living room, surrounded by the familiar possessions that had so recently been dismissed as clutter. Now, even Imogen was seeing them, seeing me, with new eyes. It was a beginning, however small. The weeks leading up to the exhibition were a whirlwind of activity. With my secret now partially public thanks to Fern's article, I no longer needed to compartmentalize my time. I spent mornings at the gallery with Jasper, arranging the exhibition space and discussing the catalog. Afternoons often found me working in my basement studio, which I had decided to keep as my creative space despite its discovery. On Saturdays, true to Imogen's word, Ren came for lessons. My grandson proved to have a natural affinity for paper art, his small fingers nimble and his imagination boundless. During our third session, as he carefully worked on a simple cutout design, he asked the question I had been expecting. "Grandma, why didn't you tell anyone you were famous? Didn't you want people to know you made beautiful things?" I considered how to explain complex adult choices to a 10-year-old mind. Sometimes, Ren, people need to keep parts of themselves private, not because they're ashamed, but because those parts are precious. Like a special treasure you want to protect. He frowned, concentrating on his cutting. "But now everyone will know it's your show, right? Aren't you scared?" "A little," I admitted. "But I'm also excited. It feels like the right time to share this part of myself with everyone." He looked up, his expression serious. "Mom's still mad at you, but she said your art is really valuable. She said you could have bought us a vacation house on the beach if you'd wanted to." I suppressed a smile at this glimpse into Imogen's private conversations. I suppose I could have, but I chose to invest in art instead, my own and others. That's the wonderful thing about growing up, Ren. You get to decide what matters most to you. "I think your art matters most to you," he said with childish certainty. "My art is very important to me," I agreed. "But so is my family, including you." He beamed, returning to his cutting with renewed enthusiasm. As I watched him work, I felt a sense of continuity I hadn't anticipated. The possibility that my artistic legacy might live on not just in galleries and collections, but in the hands of my own grandson. That evening, Fern came by with takeout from the Periwinkle Patisserie, our old favorite spot for comfort food. As we ate at my kitchen table, she finally asked the question I knew had been burning inside her since reading her article. "Was I right, Mom? About why you kept your art separate? About it being an act of courage rather than deception?" I reached across the table to squeeze her hand. "Largely, yes. Though the truth is always more complicated than can fit in a single article. Even one as beautiful as yours. I want to understand," she said earnestly. "Not just for the article, but for me. For us." I took a deep breath, trying to articulate what I had never fully explained to anyone before. "When I married your father, it was a different era. Women were expected to be wives and mothers first, with careers a distant second and personal passions barely registering at all. I loved your father dearly, and I wanted our family. But I also had this fire inside me. This need to create, to build something that was solely mine." I paused, gathering my thoughts. At first, my art was just a hobby, a small escape from the demands of daily life. But as it began to gain recognition, as collectors started buying, my pieces and galleries started showing interest, I faced a choice. I could bring my success into our family life, which would inevitably change the dynamics. Your father might have felt overshadowed, you children might have felt pressure or expectations, or I could keep it separate. And you chose separation, Fern murmured. I did, I acknowledged. Not from shame or deception, but to protect both worlds. My family life could remain normal, untouched by the complications of artistic success. And my artistic life could develop on its own merit, without being colored by my roles as wife and mother. But wasn't it exhausting? Fern asked. Living two lives? I considered this. Sometimes, but it was also exhilarating, like having a secret superpower. I smiled at the childish analogy. In my daily life, I was just Dora Kingsley, office manager and mother. But in my art world, I was E.K. Wisteria, respected artist and savvy investor. Both were true, both were me, just different facets of the same person. Fern nodded slowly. I think I understand. But Mom, what I still don't get is why now? After all these years of separation, why bring your worlds together? It was the same question Thorne had asked, though with different intent. Why reveal the truth after so long? The answer had crystallized during my time in Sage Blossom Shores. Because at 68, I've finally realized that I don't want to die divided, I said simply. I want to experience the wholeness of myself while I still can. And I want the people I love to know me, truly know me, before it's too late. Tears glimmered in Fern's eyes. I'm glad, Mom. I think I've always wanted to know the real you. I just didn't realize there was so much more to discover. The night before the exhibition, I couldn't sleep. I sat in my studio, surrounded by the pieces that hadn't been transported to the gallery, running my fingers over the intricate cuts and folds that had defined my secret life for so long. Tomorrow, E.K. Wisteria would step from the shadows, revealing herself as Eudora Kingsley, retired office manager and grandmother. What would that integration feel like? Would I lose something precious in the revelation, or gain something even more valuable? My phone buzzed with a text from Mavis. Get some sleep, you old revolutionary. Tomorrow you make history. I smiled at her characterization. I wasn't trying to make history, just trying to become whole. Yet there was something revolutionary about it, I supposed. Standing up at 68 and declaring that I contained multitudes, that I refused to be defined, solely by my relationships to others, that I had built something significant through my own vision and effort. Morning came too quickly. I dressed with care in an outfit I had specifically chosen for the occasion, a tailored indigo suit that spoke to my professional side, paired with handcrafted silver jewelry created by an artist I had mentored, acknowledging my artistic connections. My hair, which I had worn in the same practical style for decades, I left loose around my shoulders, its silver length a statement of its own. Jasper had arranged for a car to take me to the gallery. As we pulled up to the Velvet Fox, I was startled to see a line of people waiting outside. Collectors, critics, and curious locals drawn by Fern's article and the promise of discovering the true identity of E.K. Wisteria. Ready? Jasper asked, offering his arm as we approached the entrance. As I'll ever be, I replied, taking a deep breath. Inside, the gallery had been transformed. My work from across the decades was displayed chronologically, creating a visual journey through my artistic development. The centerpiece, my paper autobiography, hung on the main wall, illuminated perfectly to showcase its intricate layers. Beside each piece was a small card with not only the title and medium, but a brief personal note about what was happening in my life when I created it. It's perfect, I whispered to Jasper. You're perfect, he replied with a wink. Now go hide in the back until I introduce you. Your family is already here. Sure enough, as I peeked into the main gallery space, I saw them. Imogen standing straight-backed near the entrance, Thorne and his wife examining one of my early pieces, Fern chatting animatedly with a journalist, and Wren darting excitedly between displays. They had all come, just as they promised. At precisely 7 o'clock, Jasper clinked a glass for attention, bringing the buzzing room to silence. Distinguished guests, collectors, members of the press, welcome to this historic exhibition, The Revelation of E.K. Wisteria. For over 30 years, the work of this remarkable artist has captivated collectors and critics alike with its precision, emotional depth, and technical innovation. Many have speculated about the identity of the reclusive E.K. Wisteria, whose rare appearances at exhibitions and unwillingness to be photographed only added to the mystique. He paused, surveying the rapt audience. Tonight that mystery ends. It is my profound honor to introduce you to the woman behind the pseudonym, a woman who has built an extraordinary body of work while simultaneously maintaining a full life as a professional, a wife, a mother, and a grandmother. My heart hammered in my chest as I prepared to step forward. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you E.K. Wisteria, Ms. Eudora Kingsley. As I stepped into the gallery, the crowd erupted in applause. Cameras flashed, voices murmured in surprise, and critics who had reviewed my work for years stared in undisguised shock at the silver-haired woman before them. But I had eyes only for my family. Fern was beaming, pride radiating from her entire being. Thorn looked grudgingly impressed, his wife whispering questions in his ear. And Imogen, my critical, practical Imogen, stood with one hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. I moved to the center of the room, accepting a microphone from Jasper with hands that trembled only slightly. Thank you all for coming, I began. For many years, I've lived what might seem like two separate lives: Eudora Kingsley, office manager and mother, and E.K. Wisteria, artist and collector. But they were never truly separate. They were always two expressions of the same woman, the same heart, the same vision. I gestured to the autobiographical piece behind me. This work, which I've titled Integration, represents my journey toward wholeness. Each layer shows a different aspect of my life: family, career, art, personal growth, all interconnected, all essential to who I am. My voice grew stronger as I continued. I stand before you today not as someone who has been hiding, but as someone who has been becoming. It took me 68 years to be ready for this moment of integration, and I'm grateful to share it with all of you, especially my family, who are learning, perhaps for the first time, that their mother and grandmother contains depths they never imagined. The speech continued with acknowledgments and artistic explanations, but those opening words were the most important: my declaration of wholeness, my claim to complexity. As I spoke, I watched understanding dawn on faces throughout the crowd, saw nods of recognition from women of my generation who perhaps recognized their own compartmentalized lives in mine. When the formal presentation ended, I was immediately surrounded by journalists, collectors, and gallery patrons, all eager to speak with the newly revealed E.K. Wisteria. I answered questions graciously but briefly, my attention drawn repeatedly to my family, who waited at the edges of the crowd. Eventually, I made my way to them. Fern embraced me immediately, whispering congratulations. Thorn offered a stiff nod that nonetheless acknowledged the significance of the moment, but it was Imogen who surprised me most, stepping forward with uncharacteristic hesitation. "Mom," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I think I finally understand. It wasn't about the money at all, was it? It was about having something that was entirely yours in a world that wanted to claim every piece of you." I felt tears spring to my eyes at her insight. "Yes," I whispered. "Exactly that." She nodded, a lifetime of misunderstanding beginning to clear. "Your work is extraordinary. I've been to dozens of galleries, seen hundreds of pieces, but nothing like this." She gestured to the autobiographical piece. "It's like looking into your soul." "That's exactly what it is," I confirmed. "My soul, rendered in paper and light." Ren tugged at my sleeve. "Grandma, everyone's talking about you. That lady over there said you're a visionary master, and that man called you the most important paper artist of your generation. Are you famous now? I laughed, ruffling his hair. I suppose I am, in certain circles. But I'm still your grandma who burns cookies and forgets where she put her glasses. Can I tell my friends at school? Of course you can. As the evening progressed, I moved between worlds, artist, grandmother, businesswoman, no longer needing to keep them separate. The transformation I had begun when I decided to reveal my secret was completing itself in this public integration, this claim to my whole self. Later, as the crowd thinned and the evening wound down, I found myself standing before my autobiographical piece, studying the intricate layers that represented my journey. A presence beside me made me turn. Vivica Sterling, my former colleague who had always seemed to have more, to be more. Eudora, she said, her voice tinged with something between admiration and envy. All these years, and I never knew. You were always so ordinary at the office. I smiled at the unintended insult. Sometimes the most extraordinary things hide in ordinary packages, Vivica. She studied the piece before us. How much is this selling for? It's not for sale, I replied. This one stays with me. Everything has a price, she insisted, the old competitiveness flaring. Not everything, I said gently. Some things are beyond price, like the journey it represents. She shook her head, unable to comprehend a value that couldn't be monetized, and drifted away toward pieces that were available for purchase. I watched her go, feeling not triumph, but a strange compassion. Vivica would likely never understand the fortune I had built. Not the financial one, but the fortune of self-knowledge, of creative fulfillment, of integrity finally achieved. As the exhibition closed for the night, my family gathered around. Me, no longer strangers to my accomplishments, but witnesses to my integrated self. We weren't healed. There were still conversations to be had, adjustments to be made. But we had begun a new chapter together. Shall we go home? Fern asked, offering her arm. Home. The word held new meaning now. Not a place where I hid parts of myself, but a place where I could exist fully, completely. A place of integration. Yes, I said, taking her arm. Let's go home. 6 months after the exhibition, life had settled into a new rhythm, one that no longer required compartmentalization or secret identities. My coming out as E.K. Wisteria had created ripples that continued to expand outward, transforming not just my own life, but the lives of those around me. The basement studio had been renovated into a proper workspace with large windows and specialized lighting. The hidden door remained, but now it stood proudly open, a symbol of the integration I had achieved. Several times a week, Ren came for lessons, his natural talent flourishing under my guidance. Occasionally, Imogen would linger after dropping him off, asking hesitant questions about techniques or artistic choices, her own creativity tentatively awakening after years of dormancy. Thorne had eventually come to terms with my deception, as he still occasionally called it, in his own practical way, by helping me reorganize my financial holdings for optimal tax efficiency and long-term growth. Though he would never fully understand my choices, he had come to respect the results, both artistic and financial. Fern had perhaps undergone the most profound transformation. Inspired by my late-in-life revelation, she had left her marketing position to return to journalism, specializing in profiles of women who had carved unconventional paths through life. Her series Hidden Legacies, beginning with my story, had been picked up by a national publication and was gathering a devoted following. As for me, I had emerged from my cocoon of secrecy into a new kind of freedom. No longer Dora the office manager or E.K. Wisteria the reclusive artist, but simply myself, complex, multifaceted, whole. On a crisp autumn morning, I sat in my studio, working on a new piece while Mavis lounged in a comfortable chair by the window, leafing through the latest catalog from my exhibition in Meridian Heights. The piece had been traveling for months now, introducing E.K. Wisteria and, by extension, Eudora Kingsley to audiences across the country. "You've become quite the celebrity," Mavis remarked, tapping a photo of me speaking to a crowd of admirers. "How does it feel?" I set down my cutting tools, considering the question. Strange, but not unpleasant. Like wearing a new pair of shoes that weren't made for me but somehow fit perfectly. Mavis chuckled. "Only you would describe fame as ill-fitting footwear." "Not ill-fitting," I corrected her. "Just unexpected. I never created art for recognition. I created it because I had to. Because there was something inside me that demanded expression. And now? Now I create for the same reason, but with an awareness that others are watching, it changes things, subtly." The doorbell rang, interrupting our conversation. Mavis raised an eyebrow. "Expecting company?" "Imogen is dropping off some paperwork," I explained, setting aside my work, "and heading downstairs." But when I opened the door, it wasn't Imogen who stood on my porch, but Vivica Sterling, looking uncomfortable and out of place. "Vivica?" I said, unable to hide my surprise. "This is unexpected." She shifted her weight, clutching an expensive handbag. "May I come in? I won't take much of your time." Curious, I stepped aside to let her enter. Vivica had been notably absent from my life since the exhibition opening, though I'd heard through mutual acquaintances that she had purchased one of my smaller pieces at a significant price. In my living room, no longer dismissed as cluttered, but now viewed as an artist's thoughtfully curated space, Vivica perched on the edge of my sofa, declining my offer of tea. "I'll get straight to the point," she said, her voice carrying the brisk efficiency I remembered from our office days. "I'm starting a foundation to support women artists over 50. I'd like you to be on the advisory board." I blinked, taken aback. "Why me?" "Because you're the perfect example of what we want to support," she replied, some of her old competitiveness softening into something like admiration. "Women who create extraordinary work while the world isn't looking. Women who persist despite being overlooked or underestimated." "I'm flattered," I said carefully. "But why are you doing this, Vivica? Art has never been your passion." She glanced away, a flash of vulnerability crossing her perfectly made-up face. "Your story affected me, made me think about my own life and what I'll leave behind. I've spent decades accumulating wealth and status, but what have I created? What will remain of me when I'm gone?" The naked honesty of her words surprised me. Vivica Sterling, who had always seemed so certain of her choices, was experiencing her own moment of reckoning. "So this foundation is your creation," I suggested. She nodded. "My legacy, perhaps. Will you help me build it?" I studied her, seeing beyond the designer clothes and carefully maintained exterior to the woman beneath. Someone who, like me, was searching for meaning beyond conventional success. "I'd be honored," I said finally, "on one condition." "Which is?" "That we focus not just on established artists, but on women who haven't yet found their voice, women still trapped in the lives others expect them to lead." A smile spread across Vivica's face, genuine, without her usual calculation. "I was hoping you'd say that." She reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. "I've already started compiling ideas. Perhaps we could discuss them over lunch. Next week?" After she left, I returned to my studio, where Mavis waited with raised eyebrows. Was that Vivica Sterling I saw leaving? The same Vivica who once said your practical shoes were a crime against femininity? I laughed, recounting our conversation. Mavis listened with growing amazement. "Well," she said when I'd finished, "it seems your revelation has sparked a chain reaction. First your children, now Vivica. Who's next? The whole town?" "I prefer to think of it as a pebble in a pond," I said, returning to my work. The ripples move outward, touching shores I never imagined reaching. And reach they did. The Sterling Kingsley Foundation for Women in the Arts launched 6 months later with significant funding and immediate acclaim. Applications flooded in from women across the country. Teachers who painted at night after their children were asleep, nurses who sculpted between shifts, office workers who wrote poetry on lunch breaks. Women like I had been, carving out space for creativity in lives defined by others' expectations. We provided grants, mentorship, exhibition opportunities, all the support I had lacked in my early years. Each time we helped a woman step into her artistic identity, I felt a profound sense of rightness, as if my own journey had been leading to this all along. My personal life transformed as well. The relationship with my children deepened as they came to know me, truly know me perhaps for the first time. Imogen still struggled occasionally with what she saw as decades of deception, but even she couldn't deny the authenticity with which I now lived. "I've been thinking about taking a pottery class," she confessed during one of our now regular dinners. "I've always liked the idea of creating something with my hands." "You'd be wonderful at it," I encouraged. "You have an excellent eye for form." She looked startled, then pleased by the compliment. "Do you really think so?" "I know. So, creativity runs in the family after all." Thorne approached my artistic identity with characteristic pragmatism, helping me establish a trust to manage my collection and ensure its preservation. "These pieces should remain together," he insisted. "They tell a story that would be lost if they were scattered." I was touched by his understanding of what my work represented. Not just financial value, but a narrative woven through decades of hidden creation. Fern's Hidden Legacies series had expanded beyond my story, to include dozens of women who had built extraordinary lives beneath the radar of public recognition. She had recently received a book deal, and her editor was pressing for me to write the foreword. "You started all this, Mom," she said during a visit to my studio. "Your courage in stepping forward inspired these other women to share their stories." "It wasn't courage so much as necessity," I admitted. "I couldn't bear the division any longer." "That's exactly what courage is," she countered. "Doing what's necessary, even when it's terrifying." Perhaps she was right. There had been courage in my decision to reveal myself, to risk judgment, and misunderstanding for the sake of wholeness. And there was courage in the choices I continued to make, to teach, to mentor, to create without certainty of outcome or acclaim. One Tuesday afternoon, I received an unexpected call from Jasper Thornfield. "Dora, darling, are you sitting down? The Museum of Modern Art wants to acquire Integration for their permanent collection." I nearly dropped the phone. "But it's not for sale. I've been clear about that." I know, he said, excitement bubbling in his voice. "But this is the MoMA, Dora. They're offering to commission a reproduction for you to keep while displaying the original. They want to include it in their upcoming exhibition on lived experiences in visual form. It's an extraordinary honor." I sat in silence, absorbing the magnitude of what he was proposing. My autobiographical piece, my visual journey from division to wholeness, preserved and shared with generations to come. "Dora, are you still there?" "Yes," I said finally. "Tell them yes, but with one condition. Name it. The piece must be credited to Eudora Kingsley, not E.K. Wisteria. It's time to let the pseudonym go entirely." He chuckled. "I had a feeling you'd say that. I'll make the arrangements." That evening, I walked along Wisteria Court as the sun set, painting the familiar neighborhood in shades of amber and gold. So much had changed in the year since my revelation, yet the street remained the same. Ordinary houses filled with ordinary people, each containing worlds of complexity beneath their conventional exteriors. How many others were living divided? Lives? How many harbored talents and passions unseen by those closest to them? The thought filled me with both sadness and hope. Sadness for the constraints that led to such divisions, hope for the possibility of integration and wholeness. When I returned home, I found a package on my porch with a note from Ren. "For your new studio. Love, your apprentice." Inside was a handcrafted nameplate for my door, the letters precisely cut from wood and painted in vibrant colors. Eudora Kingsley, artist. Tears sprang to my eyes as I ran my fingers over the careful workmanship. My grandson had created this with his own hands, with skills I had taught him. Whatever else my revelation had accomplished, this tangible connection across generations felt like its most precious outcome. The following week brought another surprise, an invitation to speak at Briarwood Community College's commencement ceremony. The dean's letter explained they wanted to honor me as both a longtime community member and a newly recognized artistic voice. "Your story embodies the principles we hope to instill in our graduates: persistence, creativity, and the courage to define success on one's own terms." I accepted, though public speaking had never been my forte. As I worked on my address in the weeks leading up to the ceremony, I found myself reflecting on the nature of legacy. What message did I want to leave with these young people, many of whom were just beginning to shape their adult identities? The day of the ceremony dawned bright and clear. From the stage, I could see my family seated together in the audience: Imogen, Thorne and his wife, Fern, and Ren, all watching with varying degrees of pride and nervousness. Mavis sat beside them, giving me a thumbs up as I approached the podium. "Good afternoon," I began, my voice stronger than I expected. "My name is Eudora Kingsley. For most of my life, I was known in this community as an office manager at Briarwood Insurance, a wife, a mother, and more recently, a grandmother. What almost no one knew was that I was also E.K. Wisteria, an artist whose work hung in galleries and private collections across the country." I paused, looking out at the sea of young faces. I stand before you as someone who lived a divided life for decades, creating beauty in secret while fulfilling more conventional roles in public. I don't share this as a model to follow, but rather as a cautionary tale about the cost of compartmentalization and the power of integration. As I spoke, I could see recognition dawning in some faces, not of my specific story, which had been widely covered in local media, but of the universal experience of hiding parts of oneself to meet others' expectations. The world will often ask you to be less than you are, less complex, less challenging, less fully human. It will encourage you to fit neatly into categories and roles that make others comfortable. The greatest challenge of your lives may not be achieving external success, but rather maintaining your internal wholeness in the face of these pressures. I spoke of my journey toward integration, of the freedom that came with finally living as my complete self. I acknowledged the privilege that had allowed me to build my secret fortune: uninterrupted time, financial stability, the support of key individuals who kept my confidence. And I challenged the graduates to create communities where such divisions would be unnecessary, where authenticity would be valued above conformity. My fortune was never primarily financial, though that aspect has received much attention, I concluded. My true fortune was the ability to create, to translate my vision into tangible form, to leave behind objects that embody my perspective and experience. We all have this capacity for creation, though it takes different forms for each of us. My wish for you is that you discover your own creative voice and find the courage to use it openly, without division or fear. The applause that followed was thunderous. As I returned to my seat, I caught sight of my family: Fern wiping away tears, Thorne nodding with unusual emotion, Imogen sitting straight-backed but with unmistakable pride in her eyes. Later, at a small celebration dinner at Periwinkle Patisserie, my family presented me with a gift, a custom-designed pendant featuring a miniature paper cutting under glass, created by Ren with help from a jeweler friend of Fern's. So you can always carry your art with you, Ren explained as he fastened it around my neck. I touched the pendant, deeply moved by the thoughtfulness of the gift. It's perfect. As we ate and talked, I observed the subtle shifts in our family dynamic, the new respect in Imogen's gaze, the genuine interest as Thorn asked about my next artistic project, the easy camaraderie between Fern and me as fellow creators. We were building something new together, a relationship based on authentic knowledge rather than partial understanding. The following morning, I woke early and made my way to my studio, drawn by the quiet joy of creation that had sustained me for decades. The piece I was working on, a complex exploration of intergenerational connection, lay waiting on my work table. As sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating my tools and materials, I felt a profound sense of rightness. This was my place in the world, not hidden away, but fully integrated into the fabric of my life. The door to my studio stood open, the nameplate Ren had created prominently displayed. No more secret identities, no more compartments. Just me, in all my complexity, doing the work I was born to do. A knock at the open door made me look up. Imogen stood there, uncharacteristically hesitant. "May I watch you work for a while?" she asked. "I've never really seen the process." I smiled, gesturing to the chair beside my work table. "Of course, I'd like that." As she settled beside me, I picked up my tools and began the delicate process of cutting, layer by layer, to reveal the image hidden within the paper. We sat in comfortable silence, the only sound the soft snip of my precision scissors and the occasional rustle of paper. "It's like magic," Imogen said finally, watching as a form began to emerge from the layers of white. "Creating something from nothing." "Not from nothing," I corrected gently. "From everything. Experience, observation, imagination, skill. Nothing. We create comes from void. It all builds on what came before." She considered this, watching my hands move with practiced precision. "I think I'm beginning to understand why you needed this so much. It's not just about making beautiful things. It's about expressing something that can't be said any other way." "Exactly," I said, pleased by her insight. "Each piece is a conversation I'm having with myself and with the world, a way of making visible what would otherwise remain unseen. Like you," she said softly, "making yourself visible after all these years." I set down my tools and turned to face my eldest daughter, seeing in her expression a new openness, a willingness to truly see me. "Yes," I agreed. "Exactly like that." In the months that followed, my life continued to unfold in ways I could never have predicted when I first decided to reveal my secret fortune. The Sterling Kingsley Foundation flourished, supporting women artists across the country. My work gained recognition beyond the art world, sparking conversations about creativity, identity, and the unacknowledged contributions of older women. I began teaching regular workshops at Briarwood Community College, guiding students of all ages through the techniques I had spent decades perfecting. Many of my students were women my age or older, inspired by my story to finally pursue creative passions they had set aside for family or career. "I never thought I could start something new at 65, one woman confessed during a class. "But you showed me it's never too late to become who you really are." Her words struck a chord with me. Becoming who you really are? Wasn't that the journey we were all on, regardless of age or circumstance? Not discovering some fixed, immutable self, but rather continuously creating and integrating the various aspects of our beings into an authentic whole. My relationship with my children continued to evolve, sometimes in unexpected ways. Thorn, my practical investment banker son, surprised me by signing up for a woodworking class. "I've spent my career moving numbers around," he explained when I expressed surprise. "I want to know what it feels like to create something tangible." Imogen began taking pottery lessons, her natural perfectionism both a hindrance and a help as she learned to work with clay. "It's teaching me to accept imperfection," she admitted during one of our now regular studio visits. "Something I've never been good at." Fern's book, Hidden Legacies: Women Who Created in Secret, was published to critical acclaim, with my story as the opening chapter. At the launch event, she surprised me by revealing that she had been writing poetry for years without telling anyone. "I was afraid of being judged," she confessed, "but watching you step into the light gave me courage." And Ren, my precious grandson, continued to develop his artistic skills under my guidance, his natural talent blossoming with each passing month. "Do you think I could be famous like you someday, Grandma?" he asked once as we worked side by side. "You could be," I told him honestly. "But fame isn't the goal, Ren. The goal is to create work that expresses your unique vision, work that only you can make. The recognition may come or it may not, but the joy is in the making." He nodded solemnly, absorbing this perspective that ran counter to much of what modern culture taught about success and validation. In a world obsessed with external recognition, I wanted him to understand the profound satisfaction of creation for its own sake. One evening, as spring blossoms carpeted Wisteria Court in delicate pink and white, I sat on my porch swing watching the neighborhood children play. From inside came the sounds of my family preparing dinner. Imogen and Fern's gentle bickering over spices, Thorne's deep laugh at something Ren had said, the comfortable domestic symphony I had once feared would be disrupted by my revelation. Instead, our bonds had deepened, tempered by truth and strengthened by mutual understanding. The fortune I had hidden for so long, both financial and artistic, had not divided us as I had feared, but had ultimately brought us closer together, creating new connections based on authenticity rather than assumption. Mavis joined me on the porch, settling into the swing beside me with a contented sigh. "Penny for your thoughts?" I smiled, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades I would once have tried to capture in paper and light. "I was just thinking about fortune, what it really means." "And what conclusion have you reached?" she asked, knowing me well enough to recognize the reflective mood. "That the greatest fortune isn't what you accumulate or achieve," I said slowly. "It's what you discover and express. It's the courage to become fully yourself, whatever that might mean." Mavis nodded, understanding without need for further explanation. We sat in comfortable silence as twilight deepened around us. Two old friends who had witnessed each other's journeys with love and acceptance. Inside, Ren called my name, his voice excited about something he wanted to show me. I rose from the swing, ready to return to the warmth and light of my family, to the life I had finally managed to fully claim as my own. "Coming," I called back, taking one last look at the peaceful street where I had lived so many years divided, and where I would spend my remaining years whole. The hidden fortune I had revealed wasn't just the art or the money. It was the freedom that came with integration, with stepping fully into my authentic self after decades of compartmentalization. It was the legacy I would leave not just in galleries and collections, but in the lives I had touched, in the example I had set for my children and grandson, in the women I had inspired to claim their own creative voices. As I stepped back into my home, my true home, where all parts of me were now welcome, I felt a profound sense of peace. Whatever came next, I would face it as my complete self. Eudora Kingsley, mother, grandmother, artist, mentor, friend. No more hiding, no more division. Just me, in all my complicated, creative, fully realized humanity. And that, I realized, was the greatest fortune of all. 5 years passed in a blur of activity and transformation. My 70s, which I had once quietly anticipated as a time of gradual retreat, instead became the most expansive period of my life. The Sterling Kingsley Foundation had grown beyond our initial vision, establishing satellite offices in 3 cities and supporting hundreds of women artists through grants, exhibitions, and mentorship programs. Vivica and I had developed an unlikely but effective partnership, her business acumen complementing my artistic perspective. What had begun as her search for legacy had blossomed into genuine passion. She now spoke about emerging artists with the same enthusiasm she had once. Reserved for investment opportunities. We need to talk about the Harrisville residency program, Vivica announced, breezing into my studio one crisp October morning. Her silver hair was cut in a stylish bob, and she wore a paint-splattered smock over her designer clothing, a visual representation of her own transformation over the years. I set down my cutting tools and removed my magnifying glasses. "Good morning to you too, Vivica." She waved away my gentle rebuke with a manicured hand. "No time for pleasantries. The Oakwood Foundation just doubled their funding offer, but they want us to expand the program to 12 artists instead of 8. I think we should counter with 10 and use the extra funds to extend the residency period." I smiled at her intensity. "Sit down, Vivica. Have some tea. The Harrisville residency won't collapse if we take 10 minutes to breathe." She sighed dramatically but settled into the chair opposite my work table, accepting the cup I offered. "You've become disgustingly zen in your old age, Dora." Not zen, just experienced enough to know that few decisions are so urgent they can't wait for tea. I studied her over the rim of my cup. "What's really bothering you? This isn't about Harrisville." Vivica's carefully composed expression faltered. "My daughter called. She's getting divorced." Ah. I knew Vivica's relationship with her only child was complicated at best. Celestine Sterling Hayes was a corporate attorney in Azurite City who had always maintained a polite but distant relationship with her mother. Is she all right? I don't know. She didn't tell me herself. Her assistant called to update my contact information. Vivica's voice held a familiar bitterness. 38 years old, and she still can't bring herself to have a real conversation with me. The pain beneath her brisk exterior was palpable. In the years we'd worked together, Vivica had gradually revealed glimpses of her own compartmentalized life, the driven career woman who had delegated parenthood to nannies and boarding schools, who had pursued status and accomplishment at the expense of connection. "Have you tried calling her?" I asked gently. "Of course I have. She's too busy right now." Vivica set down her teacup with a sharp click. "Let's get back to Harrisville. At least that's something I can actually influence." I reached across the table to cover her hand with mine. "Go to Azurite City. Don't call first. Just go to her office with no agenda except to be present for whatever she needs." "She doesn't need me," Vivica said flatly. "She never has." "Everyone needs connection, Vivica, especially during difficult transitions." I squeezed her hand. "Trust me on this. I've learned a few things about repair and reconciliation." She looked skeptical but nodded slowly. "Perhaps you're right. The foundation can survive without me for a few days." "More than survive," I assured her. "We have that brilliant new program director you insisted on hiring despite her lack of traditional qualifications." That brought a smile to Vivica's face. "Zara is exceptional, rather like another unconventional artist I know." She stood, straightening her smock. "Very well, Dora. I'll go to Azurite City, but when I return, we're finalizing the Harrisville details." After she left, I returned to the piece I was working on, a gift for Ren's upcoming 16th birthday. My grandson had developed into a talented artist in his own right, working primarily in digital media, but with a strong foundation in traditional techniques I had taught him. The piece was a paper landscape of Sage Blossom Shores, where we had spent several summers together working side by side in the cottage I now owned rather than rented. As I worked, my mind drifted to the ways my family had evolved since my revelation. Imogen had recently taken early retirement from her executive position to pursue ceramics full-time, creating sculptural pieces that were beginning to attract serious attention in the art world. Our relationship had deepened into something I had never thought possible, a friendship between equals, both artists navigating different stages of the same journey. Thorne remained firmly in the financial world, but his woodworking hobby had given us common ground we had never before shared. He now understood the meditative focus of creative work, the way time could dissolve when hand and eye and material aligned in perfect harmony. Last Christmas, he had given each family member handcrafted boxes with intricate inlay work, his precision and attention to detail translating beautifully to this new medium. Fern's Hidden Legacies book had spawned 2 sequels and a documentary series, establishing her as an authority on women's unrecognized contributions across various fields. She had recently been appointed writer-in-residence at Briarwood Community College, where she taught courses on narrative journalism and creative nonfiction. Her own poetry, initially shared just with me, had been published in several prestigious journals. The doorbell rang, interrupting my reflections. I glanced at the clock, surprised to see it was already past noon. Setting aside my work, I made my way downstairs to find a delivery person holding an oversized envelope. "Ms. Kingsley, this requires a signature." After signing, I carried the package to my kitchen table. The return address was from the National Endowment for the Arts in Washington, D.C. My heart quickened as I carefully opened the envelope and removed its contents, an official letter and an elegantly designed certificate. "Dear Ms. Kingsley," the letter began, "it is our great pleasure to inform you that you have been selected to receive the National Medal of Arts, the highest award given to artists and arts patrons by the United States government." I set the letter down, my hands trembling slightly. The National Medal of Arts, an honor I had never dreamed of, never aspired to. The ceremony would be held at the White House in 3 months' time. Recipients were encouraged to bring family members to the event. Overwhelmed, I did what I had always done in moments of significance. I retreated to my studio, to the familiar comfort of paper and blade and creative focus. But for once, I couldn't lose myself in the work. The magnitude of this recognition kept intruding, along with a persistent question. What would my younger self think of this moment? The office manager who had carved out precious minutes for her art between responsibilities, the mother who had hidden her creative achievements for fear of disrupting family dynamics, the woman who had divided herself in 2 for the sake of convention. I called Mavis, who responded with characteristic bluntness. "Of course they're honoring you. It's about damn time the establishment caught up with what some of us have known for decades." Her voice softened. "I'm proud of you, Dora. Not just for the medal, but for everything that led to it. Every choice, every risk, every moment you insisted on your right to create despite the world's expectations." After we hung up, I sat at my work table, fingering the elegant certificate with its embossed seal. I'd need to call my children, make arrangements for the ceremony, prepare remarks. But first, I needed to process what this recognition meant, not just professionally, but personally. The journey from hidden artist to national honoree had been neither straight nor simple. There had been pushback along the way, critics who questioned the authenticity of my dual life, family members who struggled to reconcile their memories with this new understanding of who I was, even fellow artists, who resented what they saw as my sudden emergence from obscurity to acclaim. But there had also been profound rewards beyond recognition, the liberation of finally living as my whole self, the deepening of relationships based on truth rather than expectation, the opportunity to guide others toward their own creative fulfillment. These were the true accomplishments of my late-in-life emergence, far more meaningful than medals or museum exhibitions. I picked up my phone and called Imogen first. "Mom," she answered, the sounds of her pottery studio audible in the background. "I was just about to call you. I've been accepted to that residency in Japan we discussed." That's wonderful news, I said sincerely. Congratulations. It's only for 6 weeks, but studying with Master Tanaka is an incredible opportunity. Her voice held the quiet excitement that had replaced her former corporate intensity. What's your news? You're calling in the middle of your studio time, which means something significant has happened. I smiled at how well she now knew my rhythms. I've been awarded the National Medal of Arts. The ceremony is in January at the White House. There was a moment of silence, then a soft thud, as though she had sat down suddenly. Mom, that's extraordinary. I'm so proud of you. We all will be. Once, such an accomplishment might have triggered her competitiveness, her need to measure her own success against others. But the Imogen who had emerged over these past years had found her own metrics for fulfillment, her own path that required no comparative validation. The invitation includes family members, I continued. I'd like all of you to come if you can. Wild horses couldn't keep us away, she assured me. Ren will be over the moon. His grandmother at the White House receiving a national medal? He'll be insufferable. I laughed, picturing my grandson's enthusiasm. I should call the others. Let me do it, Imogen offered. I want to be the one to share this news. And Mom? This recognition is so deserved. Your work, your journey, they matter. Not just to us, but to the larger cultural conversation about women's creativity and persistence. Her articulation of what my story represented brought unexpected tears to my eyes. Thank you, Imogen. That means more coming from you than from any national committee. After we hung up, I returned to Ren's birthday piece, working until the light faded and my eyes grew tired. As I put away my tools, I noticed the small wooden nameplate still prominently displayed on my studio door. Eudora Kingsley Artist, Ren's gift from years ago. Its presence was a daily reminder of how far we had all come since that initial revelation. The weeks leading up to the White House ceremony were a flurry of activity. The story of my dual life and late recognition captured media attention, resulting in a fresh wave of interviews and profiles. The Sterling Kingsley Foundation leveraged the spotlight to highlight our mission, and applications for our programs doubled. Vivica returned from Azurite City with cautious optimism about her relationship with Celestine. She didn't slam the door in my face, she reported dryly. In fact, she agreed to dinner. Twice. And she's coming to visit next month. Says she wants to see what this foundation business is all about. That's wonderful, I said, genuinely pleased for her. Did you talk about the divorce? Eventually. It wasn't easy, but she hesitated, uncharacteristically vulnerable. I think she might actually need me right now. Not financially. She's doing fine in that department, but emotionally. It seems her husband left her for his research assistant. Ah, history repeating itself. I knew that Vivica's ex-husband had left her for a younger colleague decades earlier. She nodded. The parallels weren't lost on either of us, but this time, instead of telling her to toughen up and move on like I did after my divorce, I just listened. And somehow, that made all the difference. The evening before our departure for Washington, my family gathered at my home for a celebration dinner. Imogen and Fern had collaborated on the meal. Thorne had selected wines from his carefully curated cellar, and Ren had created elaborate digital place cards featuring personalized animations for each family member. As we sat around my dining table, now expanded to accommodate our growing family circle, I looked at each face in turn. Imogen, her former corporate rigidity softened by years of working with clay. Thorne, more relaxed and expressive than I had ever seen him. Fern, confident in her professional success yet still retaining her innate sensitivity. Ren, on the cusp of adulthood yet still possessing the wonder that had first drawn him to my art. I'd like to make a toast, I said, raising my glass. Not to medals or recognition, but to transformation. the kind that happens when we have the courage to live authentically, to see each other clearly, and to change our understanding. When new truths emerge. To transformation, they echoed, glasses raised. Later, as dishes were being cleared, Ren approached me with an envelope. I wanted to give you this before tomorrow's ceremony. It's not quite your birthday, but it felt like the right moment. Inside was a handmade card containing a USB drive. What's this? I asked. A digital archive, he explained, eyes bright with excitement. I've spent the past year collecting everything I could find related to your work as E.K. Wisteria. Exhibition catalogs, reviews, photographs, interviews. I've also recorded oral histories from people in the art world who worked with you over the decades, plus family reflections from all of us. It's a comprehensive documentation of your artistic journey. I stared at the small device, overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness of this gift. Ren, this is extraordinary. The National Medal acknowledges your accomplishments, he said, wisdom beyond his 16 years evident in his expression. But this preserves your process, your evolution. The medal celebrates the destination, but I wanted to honor the journey. His understanding of what truly mattered brought tears to my eyes. In that moment, I knew that whatever legacy I left behind, artistic, financial, or personal, would be carried forward with integrity and insight by this remarkable young man. The White House ceremony itself passed in a blur of formality and brightness. I wore a dress created by a textile artist supported by our foundation, accessorized with the pendant Ren had given me years earlier. My family watched from the audience, their faces shining with pride as the president placed the medal around my neck and read the citation celebrating my unique artistic vision and commitment to authenticity in both art and life. In my brief acceptance remarks, I departed from my prepared text to speak directly from the heart. This honor recognizes a body of work created over more than 4 decades, much of it while living what appeared to be an entirely conventional life, I said. Like many women of my generation, I carved out creative space in the margins of family and professional responsibilities. I built something meaningful in moments stolen between obligations, in early mornings and late nights when the world wasn't watching. I glanced at my family, drawing strength from their presence. What began as necessity, this compartmentalization of my creative self, eventually became a limitation I could no longer accept. At 68, I finally brought my hidden artistic identity into the light, integrating the divisions I had maintained for too long. This medal honors not just my artistic achievements, but that act of integration, that decision to claim wholeness after decades of division. I paused, aware of the significance of this platform and moment. My hope is that this recognition inspires others, particularly women who have set aside their creative voices for the sake of convention or responsibility, to reclaim those voices, to insist on their right to create, regardless of age or circumstance. It's never too late to become your complete self. The applause that followed felt like an affirmation not just of my work, but of my journey toward authenticity. A journey that had ultimately enriched rather than diminished my connections to those I loved. After the ceremony, surrounded by my family in the elegant reception that followed, I experienced a moment of perfect contentment. My life had expanded in ways I could never have anticipated on that day when I'd decided to reveal my hidden fortune. What had begun as a response to my children's dismissal of my accomplishments had evolved into a profound reclamation of my whole self, with ripple effects that continued to expand outward, touching countless lives beyond my own. 1 year after the White House ceremony, I celebrated my 75th birthday with a decision that surprised even me. After consulting with my attorney and financial advisors, I announced the creation of the Kingsley Center for Women's Artistic Innovation, a physical space in Briarwood Glen that would house not only the Sterling Kingsley Foundation's headquarters, but also studios, exhibition galleries, and residency apartments for women artists. The center would be built on land I had quietly purchased over the years, a beautiful wooded property adjacent to Laurel Harbor, where natural light and tranquility would nurture creative work. The architectural plans, developed in collaboration with a female-led firm specializing in environmentally sensitive design, incorporated elements of my artistic aesthetic throughout the structure. "You never cease to amaze me," Mavis said when I showed her the plans over lunch at Periwinkle Patisserie. "Just when I think you've settled into a comfortable pattern, you launch something new and ambitious." I smiled, spreading jam on a scone. "I suppose I'm making up for all those years of careful restraint." "It's more than that," she countered, studying me with the insight that came from decades of friendship. "You're building something that will outlast you, something that transforms your individual success into ongoing opportunity for others." She was right, of course. The center represented my vision for a future where women's creativity would be nurtured and celebrated, where the divisions I had navigated would become unnecessary for future generations. It was both a culmination of my journey and a beginning for countless others. The groundbreaking ceremony took place on a perfect spring day, with sunlight filtering through new leaves and wildflowers dotting the property in bursts of color. My family stood beside me as I turned the first shovelful of earth, symbolically beginning the center's physical creation. Vivica and Celestine, their relationship slowly mending through shared work with the foundation, represented our organizational partnership. Artists we had supported over the years came from across the country to witness this new chapter. As cameras flashed and applause rippled through the gathered crowd, I felt a profound sense of rightness. The fortune I had hidden for so long, both financial and artistic, had transformed into something far more valuable, a legacy of creative empowerment that would continue long after I was gone. That evening, as twilight settled over Wisteria Court, I sat on my porch with a cup of tea, watching fireflies begin their silent dance across my garden. The neighborhood had changed over the decades, with new families replacing those who had moved on or passed away. Children whose parents hadn't yet been born when I first moved here now played on these streets, creating their own memories, their own connections to this place. My phone buzzed with a text from Imogen. "Just heard from the Brookfield Gallery. They want a solo exhibition of my new series. You were right about the glazing technique. Thank you for always pushing me to take risks." I smiled, typing back congratulations and arranging to visit her studio the following week to see the completed pieces. Another text arrived from Fern, sharing the cover design for her new book. Then one from Thorne with a photo of the elaborate chest he was building for his first grandchild, due in 3 months' time. These digital messages, casual, immediate, filled with shared creative enthusiasm, represented yet another transformation in our family dynamic. The distance that had once existed between us, maintained partly by my own secrecy and partly by their assumptions, had given way to genuine connection based on mutual respect and understanding. As darkness fell, I moved inside to my studio, drawn as always to the piece of creative work. The piece I was currently developing, a large-scale installation commissioned for the center's main entrance, would be my most ambitious yet, incorporating not just paper but light, shadow, and subtle movement triggered by air currents from passing visitors. I worked until midnight, losing myself in the familiar rhythm of cutting and shaping, testing and adjusting. When I finally set down my tools, I was greeted by my own reflection in the studio window, silver hair loosely tied back, lines of concentration etched around my eyes, hands slightly stiffened with age but still precise, still capable. At 75, I was not the woman I had expected to become when I began this journey as a young office manager with a secret passion for paper art. I was something altogether more complex, more integrated, more fully realized, a woman who had finally claimed her wholeness and, in doing so, had helped others claim theirs. The hidden fortune I had revealed to my dismissive children had turned out to be far more valuable than any of us had initially understood. Beyond the financial assets and artistic accomplishments lay the true treasure, the courage to live authentically, to create without apology, and to transform limitation into possibility. As I prepared for bed that night, I thought about the plaque that would eventually mark the entrance to the Kingsley Center, From Hidden to Whole, a place for women's creative emergence. It seemed a fitting summary not just of the center's purpose, but of my own life's journey, a journey that had begun in necessary compartmentalization and culminated in joyful integration. Whatever the future held, whatever challenges age and circumstance might bring, I would face them as my complete self. Eudora Kingsley, mother, grandmother, artist, philanthropist, mentor, friend. No more hiding, no more division. Just me, in all my complexity, continuing to create until the final blade cut, the final layer revealed. And in that wholeness, I had found my truest fortune. As my 80th birthday approached, I found myself spending more time in reflection. The Kingsley Center for Women's Artistic Innovation had been operating for 5 years now, transforming the artistic landscape of Briarwood Glen and drawing visitors from across the country. The building itself had won architectural awards for its sustainable design and thoughtful integration with the natural surroundings. More importantly, it had become a sanctuary for women artists of all ages, particularly those who, like me, had come to their creative practice later in life. On a bright Tuesday morning, I sat in my favorite spot in the center's meditation garden, watching a group of resident artists sketch the flowering dogwoods. Among them was Celestine Sterling Hayes, who had not only reconciled with her mother, but had discovered a latent talent for botanical illustration after leaving her law practice. The precision and patience she had once applied to corporate contracts now found expression in delicate renderings of native flora. Her transformation was just one of many I had witnessed in this space, a space dedicated to second, third, or even fourth acts in women's creative lives. "There you are," Vivica called, making her way along the garden path with remarkable speed despite her recent hip replacement. "The film crew is here for the documentary interviews. They've set up in the main gallery." I sighed, reluctant to leave this peaceful scene. "Can't they start with someone else? Perhaps one of the younger artists?" Vivica fixed me with a stern look. "Dora, this documentary is primarily about you and the center you created. The director specifically scheduled today to interview you with the Monarch installation as the backdrop. You know how the light hits it perfectly around noon." She was, "Oh. Right, of course. The Monarch, my largest and most ambitious work to date, had been installed in the center's main gallery last year to commemorate its 5th anniversary. The piece depicted the transformation of a monarch butterfly from chrysalis to flight, rendered in thousands of precisely cut paper layers that created an illusion of depth and movement. It had become something of a signature piece for the center, embodying its mission of transformation and emergence. "Very well," I conceded, allowing Vivica to help me to my feet. At 80, my hands remained surprisingly nimble for detailed cutting work, but my knees protested more than they once had. "Have you seen Ren this morning? He was supposed to help with the lighting." "Already there and directing the crew like a seasoned professional," Vivica replied with a smile. "That grandson of yours has quite the eye." Indeed he did. At 21, Ren had developed into a talented multimedia artist, combining the paper-cutting techniques I had taught him with digital animation to create works that bridged traditional and contemporary practices. He had recently graduated from the Rhode Island School of Design and had returned to Briarwood Glen to work as the center's media coordinator while developing his own artistic portfolio. As we entered the main gallery, I saw him adjusting lights. With focused intensity, his lanky frame bent over a control panel while he directed a technician to shift a reflector. 2 degrees to the left. Perfect. Hold it there. He looked up as we approached, his face breaking into a wide smile. "Grandma, the director's been asking for you. Wait till you see how they've set up the shot. The Monarch looks absolutely incredible on camera." The gallery had been transformed into a temporary film studio, with lights, cameras, and sound equipment positioned around a seating area before my installation. The documentary, titled Late Bloomers: Women Who Reimagined Their Lives Through Art, was being produced by a respected filmmaker who had approached me after seeing the Kingsley Center featured in a national arts magazine. The director, a thoughtful woman in her 50s named Eleanor Verne, greeted me warmly. "Ms. Kingsley, thank you for making time for us today. We're hoping to capture not just your remarkable personal story, but your insights on creative emergence at different life stages." As the crew made final adjustments, I settled into the designated chair, positioned so that the Monarch installation formed a backdrop of light and movement behind me. Ren gave me a thumbs up from behind the monitors, and Vivica took a seat, just off camera, her presence a silent support. "Ready when you are," Eleanor said, nodding to her camera operator. The interview began with predictable questions about my dual life and late revelation, territory I had covered many times in the years since my story became public. But Eleanor quickly moved to deeper waters. "You've often spoken about integration as distinct from balance," she observed. "Could you elaborate on why that distinction matters, particularly for women artists?" I considered the question carefully. Balance suggests equal weight given to different aspects of one's life. Work, family, creative practice. It's an appealing concept, but often an impossible standard that leaves women feeling like they've failed when they can't achieve it. I gestured toward the Monarch installation. Integration, by contrast, acknowledges that all these elements are part of a single, complex whole. They don't need to be perfectly balanced or separated. They need to be recognized as essential components of one complete life. Eleanor nodded thoughtfully. "And this center, what do you hope it accomplishes in the long term, beyond your lifetime?" "I hope it continues to be a place where women discover or reclaim their creative voices at any age," I replied. "A place that challenges the notion that artistic emergence follows a prescribed timeline. Education in youth, establishment in early adulthood, recognition in middle age. That pattern excludes so many women whose creative lives follow different rhythms due to caregiving responsibilities, financial constraints, or simple lack of encouragement." The interview continued for nearly 2 hours, covering the center's programs, my artistic process, and the evolution of my family relationships since my revelation. As we concluded, Eleanor asked one final question. "Looking back on your journey, from office manager to nationally recognized artist, what advice would you give to women who feel they've missed their chance to pursue their creative passions?" I smiled, thinking of the hundreds of women who had found their way to the center with similar concerns. I would tell them that missed chances can be reclaimed, that it's never too late to begin or resume a creative practice, that the richness of life experience they bring to their work in their 50s, 60s, 70s, or beyond is an asset, not a liability. I paused, looking directly into the camera, and I would tell them that the greatest disservice we do to ourselves is believing that our time has passed. As long as we're breathing, our time is now. After the film crew departed, Ren joined me for lunch in the center's cafe, his eyes bright with excitement about the documentary. "You were brilliant, Grandma. They got some amazing footage of you with the Monarch. The visual metaphor is perfect." "Thank you, dear," I said, reaching over to straighten his collar, a grandmother's prerogative I couldn't seem to outgrow. "How are your own projects coming along?" His expression shifted to one of nervous anticipation. "Actually, I wanted to talk to you about that. I've been offered a residency at the Osaka Digital Arts Institute. 6 months in Japan, working with some of the most innovative multimedia artists in the field." "Ren, that's wonderful," I exclaimed, genuinely delighted for him despite the pang I felt at the thought of his absence. "When would you leave?" "September," he replied. "But Grandma, it's so far away, and with your birthday coming up, and the new expansion plans for the center." I reached across the table to take his hand. "Ren Frost, Listen to me carefully. You will accept this residency. You will go to Japan and absorb everything you can from those innovative artists. And you will not for one moment worry about me or this center. He looked torn. But you've always been here for me. I want to be here for you too. And you are, I assured him. But part of loving someone is supporting their growth, even when it takes them far away. Do you think I've spent all these years building this center and mentoring young artists just to keep my own grandson from spreading his wings? A smile slowly spread across his face. You're sure? Absolutely certain, I said firmly. Besides, Japan has excellent video calling capabilities. You can show me your work in progress, and I'll show you mine. Later that afternoon, I received a call from Imogen, who had just returned from a ceramics exhibition in Barcelona, where her sculptural vessels had received significant attention. The documentary crew said it went well, she began without preamble, typical of her still direct communication style, despite years of artistic softening. Did they get what they needed? I believe so, I replied. They'll be interviewing you. Next week, I understand. Yes, along with several other family members. They seem particularly interested in how our relationships have evolved since your revelation. She paused. Mom, I've been thinking about your upcoming birthday. 80 is significant. The family wants to do something special. Nothing too elaborate, I hope, I cautioned. At my age, elaborate celebrations feel a bit like tempting fate. She laughed. Always practical. No, not elaborate, but meaningful. We're still planning, but I wanted to make sure you'll keep the weekend free. After we hung up, I made my way back to my studio in the center's east wing. Unlike my home studio, which remained my primary creative space, this room was designed for teaching and demonstration. Today, I was scheduled to lead a masterclass for the center's current residents, 8 women ranging in age from 48 to 73, each reclaiming artistic practices set aside during years of family and career responsibilities. As I demonstrated techniques for creating dimension through layered cutting, I observed their faces, intent, focused, occasionally lighting with the particular joy of creative breakthrough. These moments were perhaps the most rewarding aspect of the center's work, witnessing women discover or rediscover their artistic voices, often after decades of silence. Remember, I told them as we concluded the session, precision comes with practice. Your hands will learn what your mind already knows. Trust the process and your own unique vision. Walking home that evening along the path that connected the center to Wisteria Court, I reflected on how thoroughly my life had transformed in the 12 years since I had revealed my hidden fortune to my dismissive children. What had begun as an act of self-assertion had evolved into a movement that had touched hundreds of lives beyond my own. The modest colonial on Wisteria Court remained my home, though it had undergone renovations to better accommodate my artistic practice. The hidden basement room was now simply another studio, its door permanently open. Family photographs mingled freely with artistic awards on the walls, visual testimony to the integration I had achieved. As I prepared a simple dinner, my phone rang. Thorne, calling from the airport on his way to a financial conference in London. Just checking in before my flight, he said. Did you receive the package I sent? It arrived yesterday, I confirmed. The box is exquisite, Thorne. Your craftsmanship has become truly exceptional. His woodworking had evolved from a hobby into a serious artistic pursuit over the years, his mathematical precision and attention to detail translating beautifully to the medium. The jewelry box he had created for my birthday featured intricate marquetry depicting the Sage Blossom Shores cottage where I still spent part of each summer. I'm glad you like it, he said, sounding genuinely pleased. I've been experimenting with that inlay technique for months. We chatted briefly about his upcoming trip and his youngest daughter's recent college acceptance before saying goodbye. These casual, affectionate conversations still filled me with quiet joy, evidence of the authentic connection we had built since my revelation had forced us all to see each other more clearly. Later that evening, Fern stopped by with a draft of her latest article, a profile of a 78-year-old former nurse who had become a celebrated textile artist after retirement. "Would you mind looking this over?" she asked. "I want to make sure I've captured the nuances of her late career, emergence without falling into predictable narratives." We sat together on my porch swing as twilight descended, discussing the article and the complexities of portraying creative late bloomers without romanticizing or oversimplifying their journeys. Fern's sensitivity and insight had made her a respected voice in arts journalism, particularly in documenting women's unrecognized contributions across various fields. "You know," she said as she was leaving, "when I think about how close we came to never knowing about your work, about E.K. Wisteria, it terrifies me. All that beauty, all that creation, might have remained hidden forever." I smiled, touched by her perspective. But it didn't. And that's what matters. After she left, I made myself a cup of chamomile tea and settled into my favorite chair by the window, watching as stars emerged in the darkening sky. At 80, I felt neither diminished nor finished, but rather continuing to unfold in ways that surprised even me. My hands remained steady enough for the detailed cutting work that had defined my artistic practice for decades. My mind remained sharp, constantly exploring new creative possibilities. And my heart had expanded beyond measure as I'd witnessed the ripple effects of my late-in-life integration. The Sterling Kingsley Foundation now supported dozens of women artists annually through grants, residencies, and exhibitions. The Kingsley Center had become a destination for artists and art lovers from across the country. My work hung in major museums and private collections, studied by art historians and aspiring artists alike. But these external markers of success, gratifying as they were, paled beside the personal transformations I had witnessed. Imogen discovering her artistic voice through ceramics, Thorne finding meditative peace in woodworking, Fern using her journalistic talents to illuminate women's hidden creative lives, Wren developing his own artistic practice that honored tradition while embracing innovation, even Vivica, whose philanthropic work had led to unexpected healing with her daughter. As my birthday approached, I found myself returning often to the question Eleanor had asked during the documentary interview. What advice would I give to women who felt they had missed their chance? The answer I had given was true, but incomplete. What I hadn't articulated was the profound liberation that comes from finally claiming one's authentic self after decades of compromise and compartmentalization. The relief of no longer maintaining divisions. The joy of being fully known and seen. On the morning of my 80th birthday, I woke early and made my way to my home studio while dawn was still breaking. The piece I was currently working on, a commission for a children's hospital in Meridian Heights, depicted a forest scene with animals hidden among the layers, designed to engage young patients in a visual treasure hunt during difficult treatments. I lost myself in the familiar rhythm of cutting and layering, barely noticing as the room brightened with morning light. A knock on the studio door eventually pulled me from my creative absorption. Imogen stood in the doorway, her expression uncharacteristically tentative. "Happy birthday, Mom," she said softly. "May I come in?" I set down my tools and opened my arms. She stepped into my embrace, something that would have been unimaginable in the days before my revelation, when physical affection between us had been awkward and rare. "Thank you, dear," I said. "You're up and about early." She smiled, a mixture of excitement and nervousness playing across her features. "We all are. We have something to show you before the formal celebration this afternoon, if you're willing to come with me now." Intrigued, I followed her out to her car, where Thorne waited in the driver's seat. "Where are we going?" I asked as we pulled away from Wisteria Court. "You'll see," Imogen replied enigmatically. "It's not far." We drove to the Kingsley Center, which seemed unusually quiet for a Saturday morning. Thorne parked near the administrative entrance, and they led me through the familiar hallways toward the exhibition wing. As we approached the main gallery, I could hear muffled voices and movements behind the closed doors. "What's going on?" I asked, suspicion growing. Imogen and Thorne exchanged glances. "Your birthday present," Thorne said simply, pushing open the doors. The gallery had been transformed. Along every wall hung photographs, hundreds of them, documenting my artistic journey from earliest attempts to recent masterworks. Interspersed among them were pictures of my family, the center's development, women we had supported through the foundation. In the center of the room stood my children, grandchildren, friends, colleagues, and artists who had been touched by my work or the center's mission. "Surprise!" they called in unison as I entered. Fern stepped forward, taking my hands in hers. "Mom, for your 80th birthday, we wanted to give you something meaningful. Something that honors not just your artistic achievements, but the journey that brought you here." She gestured around the room. "This is The Integration, Eudora Kingsley's Journey to Wholeness. A temporary exhibition documenting your path. From hidden artist to public creator, from divided self to integrated whole." Ren joined her, his expression earnest. "We've been working on this for months, Grandma. Everyone contributed. Photographs, stories, reflections on how your journey has influenced their own. It's not just a retrospective of your work, but a celebration of the ripple effects your courage has created." Overwhelmed, I moved slowly around the gallery, taking in the visual documentation of my transformation. There were photos I had never seen, Damon and me on our wedding day, my children as toddlers playing at my feet while I worked at my desk, me at office parties, practical and professional in my Briarwood insurance attire. Alongside these conventional images were photographs of my early artistic attempts, exhibition announcements for EK Wisteria shows, reviews and articles about my work over the decades. Most moving were the personal testimonials mounted beside many of the images, reflections from family members, fellow artists, women supported by the foundation, even former colleagues from Briarwood Insurance who had been astonished to discover my dual identity. Their words painted a portrait not just of an artist, but of a woman whose late-in-life courage had inspired others to examine their own unexamined assumptions and unexplored potentials. In the center of the gallery, a small podium held a leather-bound book. Imogen guided me toward it. "This is the heart of the exhibition," she explained. "We've collected stories from over 100 women who have been influenced by your journey. Artists who found their voice later in life, mothers who reclaimed creative practices, professionals who discovered artistic talents they never knew they possessed. Each of them traces some part of their emergence back to you." I opened the book with trembling hands, reading the first entry. At 62, I finally gave myself permission to paint, inspired by Eudora Kingsley's story of artistic emergence. Now at 70, I've had my first solo exhibition. It's never too late to become who you truly are. Tears blurred my vision as I turned the pages, each one containing similar testimonials of transformation and courage. My personal journey, it seemed, had sparked a movement far beyond anything I could have imagined when I first decided to reveal my hidden fortune to my dismissive children. "Do you like it?" Ren asked anxiously, hovering nearby. "Like it?" I echoed, looking up at the faces surrounding me. My family, no longer dismissive but deeply understanding. My colleagues, no longer separated from my artistic self, but fully integrated into my whole life. The artists we had supported, carrying forward the mission of creative emergence in their own unique ways. "It's the most beautiful gift I've ever received," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Not because it celebrates me, but because it celebrates all of us, all our journeys toward wholeness, all our courage in becoming our authentic selves." Later, as the formal celebration wound down and guests lingered in small groups throughout the exhibition, I found myself standing before a photograph I had never seen. An image of me in my 20s, sitting at a desk at Briarwood Insurance, a small paper cutting partially hidden beneath a stack of files. The young woman in the photograph looked serious, constrained, her creativity a secret even from the camera's eye. Beside it hung a recent portrait taken in my studio, showing me, at 79, surrounded by my work, my face alight with the particular joy of creative fulfillment. The contrast between the two images, between hiding and revelation, between constraint and freedom, told the essential story of my journey. As I studied these two versions of myself, separated by more than 50 years of living, working, creating, and finally integrating, I felt a profound sense of completion. The fortune I had hidden and eventually revealed had turned out to be far more valuable than anyone could have imagined. Not just artistic talent or financial assets, but the courage to live authentically, to create without apology, and to inspire others toward their own emergence. Whatever came next, more years of creation if I was fortunate, or the natural conclusion that awaits us all, I would face it as my complete, integrated self. No more hiding, no more division, just wholeness, in all its complex, beautiful fullness. And in that wholeness lay the true fortune I had built over 80 years of living, a fortune beyond price, beyond measure, beyond all expectation. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.